Everyone. This is the first of a few videos we're going to produce for the proper ways and tricks and tips to fill out the contract to buy and sell real estate residential here in the great state of Colorado. It is April of 2020, so let's get started. Number one, I know there's nothing to fill out, but I really want to emphasize that this contract is between both the buyer and the seller. This contract is not between you and the seller. It's not between you and your buyer. This contract is between the buyer and the seller. I think that'll help answer a lot of your questions as you're trying to fill this out. This is on behalf of who you are representing. So let's begin. As far as a buyer's name goes, I highly recommend and encourage that you talk to a lender about how they are presenting or putting together the loan package and what name they're using. I've seen some buyers use, their full middle name. Some buyers use their middle initial. Some don't use anything at all. I think the rule of thumb is, take a look and see what's on their state issued ID, or talk to the lender to get clarity around how they would like to take title, because this will be recorded with the public records. As far as how they're taking title, as far as the ownership goes, let's go one by one here. Joint tenants. This I commonly see or traditionally think of as more of like a married couple or significant other. Really, the distinguishing factor between this and tenants in common is a right of survivorship. Excuse me. As far as joint tenants goes, what right of survivorship means is if one person should pass away, the other remaining party on the deed gains full ownership of the property without having to go through the court system. And then tenants in common would be more along the lines of an investor partnership. So somebody who is looking to buy a property together, and yet if one of them should pass away, they don't want their business partner gaining full rights to the property. You probably would pass that on through your will or your trust to a family member or friend, and that would be spelled out again through the will or trust as far as the percentage of ownership. As far as other goes, but this is commonly selected if you have one sole individual purchasing a property. I have seen a couple different ways to word it. I personally like tenants in common. Ooh. I'm sorry, tenants in severalty, or just plain severalty. The choice is yours there, but if you do have just one person, there's no box for severalty. Moving right along here, assignability. This is a little newer for some agents who have been around for a few years. There is no assignability built right into this contract. And for those agents that are unsure what assignability truly means, assignability would mean anybody listed up here in the buyers section would have the ability to assign this contract during the under contract phase to another buyer or entity. One primary example is a buyer goes under contract in their personal name, gets really excited and forgets that they really wanted this contract or this property to be underneath an entity, such as a family trust or something of that nature. If you know you might be assigning this contract during the under contract phase, I highly recommend you put it into the additional provisions section down at the bottom of the contract. Section 30 something, I believe. Moving right along, the property, there's two things you need to list here in the property. Down here is the common address. This is what you would think of as more of a mailing address. And then up here, this would be the legal description, or the lot and block, you've heard some people call it. And then up here, you need to put the county that the property or residence is in. Section 2.5, this we need to focus on. This is where we need to absolutely take our time with. I see a lot of mistakes come through in different contracts. Do yourself a favor, and just like 2.5 and any other section of this contract, make sure that you are reading through every single clause that's in here. If you do not understand it, if you do not understand how to explain it to somebody in layman's terms, reach out to a coach, a mentor, take a class. You do need to know what these contracts are saying. I know we're all licensed to practice limited law, but the limited law that we are practicing are these boilerplate contracts, and it's hard to practice something that you don't understand or know yourself. So jumping right into section 2.5 and inclusions and exclusions. This top part here, let's talk about garage remote controls. My rule of thumb and simple rule of thumb is if it's a one-car garage, I very well may ask for 2 garage remote controls. If it's a 2-car garage, I'm going to ask for 2. The key is I like to see the wording working. So if I have a 2-car garage, I would typically put 2 working remote controls. Believe it or not, I've been to a couple of closings where I've been handed a mess of garage remote controls saying one of these should work, no batteries, nothing synced up to the system. It just saves a lot of time and headache for your buyers. The one last thing they need on their plate as they're moving into their new home. Down here, this is another area I see commonly misfilled in, I should say. If there's solar panels on the home, water softeners, security systems, or satellite systems, double check with the listing agent or the seller to make sure that they are specifically owned by the seller. There's a lot of different solar companies out here, and there's a lot of different homeowners who have a solar lease in place. This box, if there's a solar lease in place, this box would not be checked as the sellers do not own that equipment just yet until the lease is paid off. I'll show you down in the due diligence section how to properly put that into the contract if it's not specifically owned. So go ahead and click through there if there's anything that is owned on the property, and then move right along to section 253 and 254. Here again, as you read it, it can kind of be a little confusing as to what to put in here. My rule of thumb simply is if it's not something that is attached or functioning for the home, it needs to go up here in section 253. And I'll explain here in a second. If it is attached or a certain attribute of the home that helps the home function, it needs to go down here in other inclusions. And this would be appliances, washer, dryer, dishwasher, garbage disposal. I want to pause for a second and talk about garbage disposals. Garbage disposals are supposed to be listed here. I personally have gone through a contract where I failed to type in a disposal would be included. It was a flip, and the seller took out the garbage disposal. We went to go do our walkthrough, turned on the water in the kitchen sink, and water was going right into the cabinet. I had to learn the hard way that the seller had the right to take that garbage disposal out of the plumbing fitting, and honestly did not have to hook back up that sink. So be diligent. Make sure you understand where and what to put into your inclusions, exclusions. Section 255, we're talking about parking and storage facilities. So this is where you list the garage spaces, maybe carports, maybe a parking space that is deeded with the property, maybe in a condo or townhome complex. So you would simply put 2-car attached. Oops. Garage. Down here, this would be your storage facility. So it could be a shed, it could be a barn, it could be an outbuilding, a Quonset hut. Let's say you have a 2-car attached garage and also a 4-car detached garage. Is it labeled a barn? How's it deeded? Make sure that this is all in there in its specific manner. And then in section 2.6, you have your exclusions. In the MLS, a listing should have what all is being excluded with the property. Now, even with a vacant property and in all properties, I preach very much to always put in seller's personal property. Again, even on a vacant property, and the case being that when you go through the home, you're seeing it as you're looking at it. But if you do not put seller's personal property in here, you go under contract, the inspector gets up into the attic, a crawl space, you name it, and finds a whole bunch of trash, things that the buyers don't need, things that the sellers are just trying not to have to haul away. This would protect you in that you can ask them to kindly remove it. If there are no exclusions on the property, you're basically saying I'm taking this as is. Another popular place that is forgotten, either forgotten by a seller or just simply trying to hide the fact that they don't want to move something, is behind sheds. Sheds commonly are up against fences, and there's a little bit of gap between the fence and the shed. Take a look behind there, make sure there's nothing that your buyer would be upset with if closing time comes and they move in and there's a whole you know a barrel of oil behind the shed. That's happened before. Anyways, moving right along, section 2.7, water rights and well rights. This is something that is rarely filled out, but I want to take a second to kind of talk about it. If the property is on a city water and sewer, you don't need to fill out anything here. There's a source of water addendum that will be attached or needed to be filled out by the seller, delivered to buyer as part of the disclosure process after you go under contract. If there is a well, this is where I'll show you to click on this box here. Go into the public records, find the well permit number, unless it's provided to you by the listing side. Honestly, even if it's provided by the listing side, anything that's provided by the listing side, if you can verify, if you can double check, that is highly encouraged and highly recommended. You are representing your client. Typically, when you're filling this out, you're representing a buyer. Make sure it's filled out with everything that you know, and I can assure you it's not good to always take the seller's word for it. So always look in public records for things of that nature. Now, in this section, you're going to see some other things. For the video's purposes, I'm going to defer to asking your coach, asking your mentor, asking your managing broker or leadership how to fill out this contract if you have any sort of water rights or deeded water stock certificates, anything of the nature of water to be conveyed with the sale of this property. If it's not on a well or it's not a city lot and block, city water and sewer, please seek guidance on how to properly fill this out. All right.